There is a war most people are fighting, silently, inwardly, and often in shame. It does not take place in public. There are no medals awarded, no visible scars, and yet its outcomes shape entire lives. It is the war between a person and their desire, especially the kind of desire that consumes more than it creates: lust. Desire in its purest form is not the enemy. Without desire, we would not evolve, build, or love. But lust is a distorted kind of hunger, not a hunger for union or meaning, but for possession, escape, and momentary power. It distracts. It hijacks. It promises closeness but delivers disconnection. It thrives in secrecy, shame, and repetition. And for centuries, it has been seen as one of the greatest spiritual and psychological obstacles to human freedom. Today, in an age of endless digital stimulation, where dopamine is dispensed with a swipe and intimacy is confused with visibility, the struggle with lust has not disappeared. It has only taken new shapes. From compulsive scrolling to shallow validation, many are caught in invisible patterns that drain their energy, scatter their attention, and erode their inner strength. And most of them do not even know why they feel so tired, unmotivated, or anxious. They just know something feels missing. But this battle is not new. Across history, thinkers, mystics, and philosophers have warned of lust's shadow. Ancient Stoics, early Christian desert monks, Sufi poets, and Buddhist ascetics all pointed toward a profound truth. To govern one's desires is to govern one as destiny, not by repressing passion, but by refining it, redirecting it, not to become less human, but to become more whole. This video is not about shame. It is about clarity. It is not about condemning pleasure, but about reclaiming your power to choose what nourishes you versus what slowly eats away at your core. It is about understanding lust not as a sin to punish, but as a signal to decode, a signal that something deeper is calling out for your attention. And if you can listen, really listen, you might find that whoever overcomes lust does not just overcome a moment of temptation. They overcome the illusion of control that the world sells us. They rise above it, and they begin to live from within. Let us begin. Lust has been recognized as both a primal drive and a profound source of tension in human civilization. The history of how we've understood and dealt with lust is rich, layered with spiritual, philosophical, and psychological insights that reveal not just a conflict between desire and morality, but a deeper struggle within the human soul, a struggle that transcends time and culture. At its core, lust is a desire for something that promises immediate gratification, but often leaves a void afterwards. It's driven by the need to possess, to control, and to escape from discomfort, emotional, physical, or existential. But this drive, as powerful and consuming as it can be, is not merely a matter of biological instinct. It has always been, in many ways, a reflection of our deepest fears, desires, and values as a species. In ancient Greece, for instance, philosophers like Plato and Aristotle did not shy away from acknowledging human desire, but they also understood that unchecked lust could ruin the soul, as pursuit of higher wisdom and virtue. Plato, in particular, saw the human soul as a chariot drawn by two horses, one noble, striving for the good, the true, and the beautiful, the other wild and untamed, driven by base desires. To tame this unruly horse was seen as essential for living a life of philosophical clarity and moral integrity. For the Greeks, controlling lust was not about rejecting human nature, but about making sure the pursuit of wisdom remained the guiding force of one akris, life. Desire, when guided by intellect and virtue, could elevate the individual. When left unchecked, it could destroy everything. The Romans, inheritors of Greek philosophical traditions, also grappled with the problem of lust. Stoics like Epictetus and Seneca taught that passion, including sexual desire, should be governed by reason and self-control. For the Stoics, self-discipline was the foundation of a tranquil and virtuous life. Lust, as an unchecked passion, was a form of slavery. Slavery to the body, to fleeting pleasures, and to illusions of control. They encouraged the cultivation of virtues like courage, wisdom, and temperance to rise above the tyranny of unchecked impulses. In their view, freedom came not from indulging the senses, but from mastering them. However, it was in the Christian tradition that the moral and spiritual framing of lust as a vice reached its most intense expression. Christianity, especially in its early monastic form, viewed lust not just as a disruptive force, but as one of the most dangerous of the 7 deadly sins. St. Augustine, one of Christianity's most influential thinkers, famously struggled with lust throughout his life, writing about his own battles with temptation and the consequences of indulgence. For Augustine, the human soul was in a constant state of conflict between carnal desires and spiritual aspirations. He saw lust as a perversion of God as intent for human sexuality, a force that pulled the soul away from divine truth and towards self-centeredness. As Christianity spread across Europe, its moral teachings became intertwined with laws, cultures, and societal norms. Lust became a symbol not just of personal weakness, but of a moral failure that could taint the soul, leading it astray from salvation. The religious and cultural prohibitions against lust were strict, and people's relationships with their desires became laden with guilt, fear, and repression. The medieval period, with its ascetic monks, chaste nuns, and religious orthodoxy, elevated the rejection of lust to a virtue. The idea was that to purify the soul, one must detach from earthly desires, sex being the most potent of these. Monastic life, with its celibacy vows and stringent fasting practices, was seen as a model of the pure life, the one that could ascend to heaven. In this context, lust was not simply an indulgence. It was seen as a spiritual corruption that could derail an individual's path to divine closeness. Yet, even within this religious framework, there were subtle shifts. The rise of mysticism, particularly in the Sufi and Christian traditions, introduced a more nuanced understanding of desire. Sufi poets, such as Rumi, spoke of love and desire as pathways to spiritual union with the divine. Lust, in this context, was still seen as a distortion, but desire itself, if refined and directed, could become a force for spiritual transcendence. Rumi, as famous metaphor of love as a fire burning away the ego, suggested that even the most powerful desires could be transmuted into something higher. During the Renaissance, the relationship between lust and human nature began to evolve in Western thought. Humanists like Michel de Montaigne shifted away from seeing lust as purely sinful. Instead, they acknowledged it as a natural human impulse, a force of vitality that could be channeled creatively. Montaigne, in his essays, explored the complexity of human desires, suggesting that while lust could be a source of excess, it could also be a source of beauty and passion. It was not something to be eliminated, but understood and integrated into the fullness of human experience. Fast forward to the modern era, and the view of lust shifts again. The Enlightenment period brought about a more individualistic view of human desires. Sigmund Freud, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, redefined lust through the lens of psychology. He argued that sexual desire, or libido, was a fundamental aspect of the human psyche, not inherently sinful, but part of a complex set of drives that shaped human behavior. Freud's work, particularly in his theories of the unconscious mind, shifted the conversation away from religious guilt and towards understanding desire as a psychological force that could shape and distort our sense of self. In the 20th and 21st centuries, The rise of consumer culture, the advent of the Internet, and the increasing focus on individual pleasure have brought lust into new arenas. In contemporary society, lust has become commodified, marketed, and normalized. Yet this flood of sexual imagery and instant gratification has created its own set of problems: emotional disconnection, an over-reliance on external validation, and an ever-deepening sense of emptiness in many people's lives. In a world where lust is everywhere, it often becomes hard to distinguish between genuine connection and hollow consumption. In this light, overcoming lust has evolved from a religious or moral directive to a psychological and personal one. What was once framed in terms of spiritual salvation has, in modern times, become a conversation about personal freedom and inner peace. Lust, in this context, is no longer simply about a momentary indulgence, but about the ways in which it governs our lives, our thoughts, and our relationships. So, what remains the same across centuries of thought is this: lust, when unchecked, takes away from our deeper sense of self. It pulls us away from purpose, meaning, and connection. And yet, it is not so simple as labeling lust as evil or wrong. Overcoming lust, then, is not about condemning desire, but transforming it. By understanding it, facing it head-on, and redirecting its energy, we can learn to rise above the cycles of fleeting pleasure that leave us empty, and instead tap into a higher form of vitality and purpose. The journey of overcoming lust is, at its heart, the journey of self-mastery. It is about regaining control over the forces within us that seek to lead us astray. It is about knowing ourselves well enough to discern what truly nourishes us, and what ultimately depletes us. In the modern age, the psychological understanding of lust goes far beyond its mere association with desire and sex. Psychologists, particularly in the fields of behavioral science and human development, have come to recognize lust as a deeply embedded part of human nature, a force that can shape not only sexual behavior, but also a wide range of emotional and social experiences. To overcome lust, then, is to unlock a deeper understanding of our own motivations, insecurities, and aspirations. Lust is often framed in psychological terms as an unconscious drive, one that transcends mere attraction and touches upon deeper fears and needs within the individual. Sigmund Freud's theory of libido, or sexual energy, places lust at the core of human development. In his model, lust, or sexual desire, is a central motivating force that drives many of our actions, often without our conscious awareness. Freud's theory suggests that our desires, whether sexual, emotional, or social, are deeply intertwined with our unconscious mind and our formative experiences. Lust, then, is not just a biological urge but a product of past traumas, unmet needs, and unconscious fantasies. However, modern psychology recognizes that lust is not solely a product of sexual instincts or childhood experiences. It also plays a significant role in how individuals form identities, relate to others, and navigate society. One psychological theory that sheds light on this is attachment theory. Developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, attachment theory explores how early relationships with caregivers shape our expectations and behaviors in later relationships. When individuals experience insecure attachment in childhood, marked by neglect, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability, they may grow up to seek out relationships that mirror these early dynamics. For many, lust becomes an expression of emotional neediness, a way of seeking validation or filling an emotional void. In this sense, lust is not merely about physical pleasure, but about an unconscious attempt to regain the warmth and closeness that was lacking in childhood. The need for validation, acceptance, and intimacy is a driving force in lust, particularly in modern society where relationships are often transactional. In today's world of social media, where likes, comments, and followers often serve as substitutes for genuine connection, lust becomes less about mutual desire and more about external affirmation. Research in social psychology shows that many individuals seek validation through fleeting connections, especially in a hypervisual, performance-oriented world. These short-lived validations, however, often leave a deep sense of emptiness behind, perpetuating a cycle of desire that is never fully satisfied. Social psychologists like Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary have emphasized the human need for belonging, asserting that the desire for acceptance is a fundamental driver of human behavior. When this need is unmet, individuals may turn to lust as a quick fix for the underlying loneliness or disconnection. In contrast to Freud's perspective, modern cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, offers another layer of understanding about lust. CBT focuses on how thought patterns and beliefs influence emotional and behavioral responses. Lust, in this context, is not merely an unconscious drive, but a learned behavior rooted in habitual thought patterns. These patterns are often shaped by societal influences, including advertising, pornography, and media representations of sex and intimacy. The overemphasis on physical attraction and instant gratification in contemporary culture cultivates distorted beliefs about relationships and desire. For many, the constant exposure to hypersexualized imagery and shallow representations of intimacy leads to unrealistic expectations about connection and love. At the heart of this is the cognitive distortion known as catastrophizing, where individuals expect that they cannot live without the object of their lust or desire. This pattern of thinking can exacerbate feelings of anxiety, inadequacy, and longing. CBT offers practical tools to challenge these cognitive distortions, such as mindfulness, reframing, and cognitive restructuring. By bringing awareness to the thought patterns that fuel lustful desires, individuals can begin to deconstruct the false beliefs that drive them, leading to healthier relationships with both themselves and others. Lust, when understood through the lens of social psychology, also ties into larger cultural narratives about identity and power. In many ways, the way we view and experience lust is shaped by the broader social context in which we live. For instance, in societies that emphasize hyper-masculine ideals or beauty standards, lust becomes a performance, something to be showcased for external approval. This is particularly true in the case of both men and women who feel pressure to conform to particular roles or expectations. In a world that often defines worth by appearance, lust is no longer just an internal desire. It becomes an external commodity. Studies have shown that this societal pressure can lead to body image issues, sexual objectification, and unhealthy dynamics in both romantic and social relationships. Carl Jung's exploration of the unconscious adds a profound layer to our understanding of lust. According to Jungian psychology, lust is not merely a superficial desire but is connected to the deeper, often shadowy aspects of the self. In his work on the shadow, Jung described how parts of our psyche, those elements we repress or deny, manifest in various ways, including through our desires. Lust, in Jungian terms, can be understood as an expression of the shadow self, where repressed needs and emotions demand attention. These unconscious desires are often projections of unacknowledged parts of the self, and by confronting them, individuals can gain access to greater self-awareness and transformation. Jung argued that to truly overcome lust, one must first confront the shadow aspects of desire, the unconscious motivations and fantasies that fuel it. When we attempt to suppress or ignore these parts of ourselves, we lose the opportunity for growth. But when we shine a light on them, when we allow ourselves to see the parts of us that seek validation, control, or escape through lust, we gain the power to transform them. Lust, in this sense, is not a battle between good and evil, but a process of integration. It is about acknowledging the depth of one's desires without being enslaved by them. This self-awareness opens the door to a more profound sense of authenticity and personal freedom. Perhaps one of the most impactful psychological frameworks when it comes to understanding lust is the concept of self-regulation. Self-regulation refers to our ability to manage and control our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in the pursuit of long-term goals, even when immediate gratification beckons. In the context of lust, self-regulation becomes the cornerstone of overcoming desire. The ability to pause, reflect, and choose a response that aligns with our values rather than our impulses is what allows us to move beyond the surface-level satisfaction of lust and into deeper, more meaningful pursuits. This concept of self-regulation resonates with the teachings of ancient wisdom, particularly the Stoics and Buddhist philosophers, who saw the path to freedom as one of inner discipline. In a modern psychological context, self-regulation is not about repressing desires, but about understanding them, recognizing their transient nature, and choosing not to be controlled by them. It is about building resilience and fostering a sense of inner strength that allows you to rise above the forces that would otherwise dominate your mind. So, overcoming lust, psychologically speaking, is not about denying human nature, nor is it about achieving a state of perfect purity. It is about developing the emotional intelligence and psychological resilience to respond to desires in a way that aligns with your deeper sense of purpose and authenticity. It is about recognizing the forces within you that drive you toward immediate gratification, and instead choosing to direct that energy towards something more meaningful, fulfilling, and lasting. In this sense, overcoming lust is not just a personal victory. It is an ongoing practice of self-awareness, emotional regulation, and self-empowerment. By developing a deeper understanding of the psychological dynamics behind lust, we gain the tools not only to control our impulses but to live with more purpose, integrity, and authenticity. It is a transformative process that requires patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to face the complexities of our desires head-on. The consequences of neglecting or misunderstanding the deeper nature of lust extend far beyond the realm of sexual behavior. Lust, when unchecked, can have profound emotional, psychological, and social repercussions that affect the very fabric of one's identity, relationships, and overall sense of purpose. In this section, we will explore how these consequences manifest in the individual's life and how they ripple outward into wider societal and relational contexts. Identity and self-worth. At the heart of many psychological struggles lies the question of self-worth. Lust, particularly in modern times, has become entangled with how we perceive our own value. In a world that prioritizes appearance, instant gratification, and validation, many people begin to associate their sense of worth with their ability to attract others or achieve fleeting pleasures. This creates a fragile sense of self, one built not on authenticity, but on external approval. For many, lust becomes the primary means through which they feel validated. The rush of attraction, the sense of being desired, provides a temporary boost to self-esteem. Yet, this boost is fleeting. The satisfaction derived from lust is transient, and once the initial high fades, individuals often find themselves feeling emptier than before. This cycle of seeking validation through lust leads to a deeper sense of insecurity, as self-worth becomes increasingly dependent on external sources of affirmation. It's as though the self is constantly reaching out for something to fill a void, but the satisfaction is always short-lived, leaving an underlying sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction. Psychologically, this pattern is linked to a phenomenon known as self-objectification. Self-objectification occurs when an individual begins to see themselves primarily through the lens of how others perceive them, particularly regarding physical attractiveness. This objectification robs the individual of their true sense of self, turning them into an object of desire rather than a whole person with depth and complexity. The result is often a constant yearning for external approval and validation, which can perpetuate cycles of lust-driven behavior. As this process continues, the individual loses sight of their true identity, becoming more and more consumed by the quest for approval rather than authentic self-expression. Relationships and emotional disconnect. The impact of unregulated lust extends profoundly into our relationships. When lust becomes the primary motivation for romantic or sexual interactions, it distorts the way we relate to others. Lust often creates a false sense of intimacy, one that is based on physical attraction or fleeting emotional highs rather than a deep connection between two people. This is especially true in the age of social media, where relationships are often superficial and performance-driven. The deeper emotional bonding that should form the foundation of a healthy relationship is replaced by an immediate craving for validation and satisfaction. When relationships are built on lust rather than genuine connection, they become transactional. Partners may seek to fulfill each other's needs for affection, physical connection, or status, but the emotional intimacy required to sustain a long-term bond is missing. Over time, the lack of deeper connection leads to emotional distance and dissatisfaction. Couples may find themselves locked in a cycle of desire, constantly seeking the next rush of pleasure, but never achieving the deeper fulfillment that true intimacy brings. Instead of growing together, they become increasingly disconnected, unable to transcend the surface-level dynamics of lust and build a lasting, meaningful relationship. This pattern often results in broken relationships, betrayal, and feelings of unfulfilled longing. When one or both partners focus too heavily on lust, the underlying emotional needs of the relationship are neglected. This emotional neglect can lead to frustration, resentment, and ultimately, separation. In many cases, the constant pursuit of physical desire takes precedence over mutual understanding, trust, and respect, the pillars of healthy and lasting relationships. Career, ambition, and direction. Lust's influence can also extend into one's professional life, subtly undermining the pursuit of meaningful goals and aspirations. While it may seem unrelated, unchecked lust can create distractions that pull an individual away from their true calling or purpose in life. The craving for instant gratification often manifests in a lack of discipline and focus. This can lead to procrastination, short-term decision-making, and a tendency to seek out pleasure rather than work towards long-term, fulfilling goals. When a person is preoccupied with lust or the desire for external validation, their ambitions become clouded by momentary desires. The immediate pleasure of indulging in lust can feel more compelling than the delayed gratification of working hard toward a meaningful career or personal development. This conflict between short-term pleasure and long-term fulfillment can create deep inner tension, leaving the individual stuck in cycles of pursuit that do not lead to lasting satisfaction. This tendency can also manifest in self-sabotage, as the individual might choose to prioritize personal indulgence over professional growth, leading to missed opportunities, lack of progress, and frustration. Over time, this pattern can cause a significant decline in self-confidence and a sense of powerlessness. The person may feel trapped in a cycle where their desires for temporary satisfaction override the more enduring rewards that come with sustained effort and growth. The paradox of overcoming lust. Historical contexts. If we look back at the historical narratives of figures who struggled with and overcame lust, we see a powerful and resonant theme. Many religious and philosophical traditions have depicted lust as not just a personal vice, but a barrier to transcendence. In the Christian tradition, figures like St. Augustine spoke about the soul's struggle with lust as part of a broader quest for spiritual purity. Augustine's life is a poignant example of how a person can be bound by lust, only to experience profound liberation through spiritual practice and self-discipline. His ultimate transformation came when he realized that only by overcoming his desires could he experience the fullness of divine love and inner peace. In ancient Greek philosophy, the philosopher Diogenes is another example of someone who, while advocating for a life of self-sufficiency and freedom from societal norms, also emphasized the importance of overcoming base desires. Diogenes viewed lust as a form of slavery to one's passions, hindering true freedom. By embracing a life of asceticism and self-control, Diogenes sought to transcend not just the desires of the body, but also the falsehoods of societal expectations. The stories of these historical figures reflect the broader theme that lust, when unchecked, can lead us to false perceptions of ourselves and our place in the world. The ultimate liberation from these falsehoods requires us to face the depths of our desires and, with discipline, rise above them. Similarly, in mythological traditions, heroes and deities often face temptations related to lust, temptations that must be overcome for them to achieve their true purpose. Greek myths, for example, frequently depict gods and mortals alike battling the destructive forces of lust. These myths are symbolic, showing how unchecked desire leads to chaos, while overcoming it brings clarity, wisdom, and power. The cultural impact of lust, a modern reflection. Today, lust is not just a personal issue, it is a cultural phenomenon that affects us all. The pervasive nature of sexual imagery and the objectification of people in media, advertising, and popular culture sends powerful messages about human worth and desire. The glorification of lust through these mediums contributes to the normalization of harmful dynamics in relationships and personal identity. The consequences of this are far-reaching, affecting everything from self-esteem to interpersonal dynamics. The pressure to conform to unrealistic standards of beauty and attraction can cause individuals to feel inadequate or unworthy. For those who are constantly exposed to these ideals, lust becomes not just an internal struggle, but a social expectation, one that reinforces shallow notions of what it means to be desirable or successful. The impact on self-worth can be devastating, particularly in societies that equate attractiveness with value. In this sense, the modern struggle with lust is not only about the individual's internal battles, but also about how external influences shape and amplify those battles. Understanding and overcoming lust in today's world requires not only self-reflection, but also a reclaiming of agency from the cultural narratives that bind us. To build on the current exploration and add a deeper layer of insight, let's dive further into why the journey of overcoming lust is not just an individual challenge, but a collective experience. Lust, as we've explored, is not only a deeply personal force, but one that reflects the culture, values, and narratives of the time. In this additional section, I want to take a step back and look at the wider societal implications of this pursuit, how overcoming lust can change not only our personal lives, but also the way we engage with the world, culture, and relationships. The cultural dimensions of lust. Lust is not something that exists in isolation. It is a force that is deeply woven into the fabric of our cultural norms, beliefs, and media landscapes. In modern society, lust is often celebrated, commodified, and seen as a vital aspect of identity. From advertisements to movies, social media to pop culture, lust is marketed as a means of gaining power, pleasure, and validation. But, as we've seen, the reality of this drive is far more complex. The influence of modern culture on how we view and experience lust cannot be overstated. We live in a world that constantly tells us to seek pleasure, satisfaction, and fulfillment through external means, particularly through sexual conquest or the objectification of others. This cultural lens distorts our relationship with lust, making it feel like an urgent, uncontrollable force, something that is natural, but also something we are supposed to have at all costs. We see this in the proliferation of hookup culture, the endless stream of sexually charged imagery in the media, and the increasing commodification of intimacy itself. But there's a deeper layer. While modern society often encourages us to act on lust impulsively, it doesn't give us the tools to truly understand it or transcend it. It pushes us to satisfy desire without teaching us the skills needed for sustaining deeper, more meaningful relationships that go beyond the surface-level, transactional nature of lust. The increasing number of broken relationships, mental health issues, and feelings of isolation in the modern world suggests that our culture's approach to lust and desire is inherently flawed. We've come to believe that fulfillment can be bought, consumed, and experienced quickly, but true satisfaction, whether emotional, psychological, or spiritual, often requires a much deeper process. As we explore this idea further, it is helpful to look back at how previous societies and philosophers dealt with the issue of lust. In many ancient traditions, lust was seen as a challenge to overcome, but not necessarily something to repress or deny altogether. Instead, it was viewed as a passageway to higher wisdom, a force that, when consciously channeled, could elevate the individual and society. In ancient Greece, for example, philosophers like Plato and Aristotle talked about how sensual desires could be transcended through rational thought and spiritual practice. Lust, in this sense, was a kind of test, one that challenged people to not merely indulge their physical drives, but to move towards something greater, something that aligned with the good life. This type of thinking was also prevalent in Eastern spiritual practices, where the relationship with desire, whether lust, greed, or attachment, was viewed as a karmic cycle that had to be broken through mindfulness, meditation, and self-control. In Buddhism, for example, the idea of overcoming attachment is central to the path toward enlightenment. Lust, as one form of attachment, could be transformed into spiritual growth through detachment and the cultivation of compassion and wisdom. In contrast, modern society often sees such ancient practices as outdated or extreme, favoring instead a more indulgent, instant gratification-driven approach. But perhaps this is where the modern world is missing a key insight from the past: that sustained happiness and personal growth come not from the endless pursuit of desire, but from the mastery of desire. When we transcend lust, we don't merely suppress it, we transform it. We give it purpose and direction, turning a powerful instinct into a force that serves our higher self. Lust and society's changing dynamics. It is important to remember that the dynamics of lust and desire evolve alongside the broader societal changes. In the past, particularly in more traditional or patriarchal societies, lust was often tied to power dynamics, gender roles, and control. Lust was frequently suppressed or manipulated by religious institutions, and the consequences of indulgence were seen as moral failings. Women were often the subjects of lust, and their sexuality was policed, while men were encouraged to pursue it. These gendered power structures created tension around lust, often fueling both shame and dominance. However, in more modern, egalitarian societies, the conversation around lust has shifted. There's now a push for sexual liberation and freedom of expression, where people are encouraged to explore their desires more openly, and where consent, agency, and mutual respect are prioritized. This shift has been both empowering and, at times, overwhelming. While sexual autonomy is a crucial aspect of self-expression, the pressure to perform, the fear of inadequacy, and the fear of being consumed by endless desire can leave many people feeling unfulfilled and anxious. The increase in casual relationships, hookup culture, and digital pornography shows how modern society is simultaneously embracing and struggling with lust in new ways. In this context, overcoming lust means creating space for deeper meaning and fulfillment in relationships. It is about recognizing that lust, while natural, doesn't have to dominate our interactions with others. It is about consciously choosing to engage in relationships that are based not on mere physical attraction, but on emotional intimacy, mutual growth, and shared vision. In a world where superficiality is rampant, the choice to rise above lust and seek something genuinely enriching is an act of resistance, a resistance against the forces that commodify our deepest emotional and spiritual needs. The call for integration. So, what does it mean to integrate this wisdom in today's world? To overcome lust means to reconcile the natural impulses we have with the conscious direction of our lives. It's not about purging ourselves of desire, but about channeling it into something constructive. This process of integration requires us to reflect on our relationships with desire, both sexual and emotional, and ask ourselves, are we allowing lust to control our decisions, or are we using our energy to fuel our creativity, intellectual pursuits, and spiritual growth? Are we cultivating meaningful connections with others, or are we stuck in cycles of short-lived pleasure and disappointment? Are we honoring our emotional needs and self-worth, or are we sacrificing them for transient desires? In a world that often asks us to act without thinking, to consume without feeling, and to exist without purpose, the act of mastering lust is an act of profound self-respect and personal power. It is the recognition that we are more than our desires, and that by choosing to transform lust into wisdom, we unlock a greater freedom, a freedom to live intentionally, to grow beyond the limits of impulsive behavior, and to engage with the world in a way that aligns with our highest values. By integrating this wisdom into our lives, we not only overcome lust, but we also transcend the noise and distractions of the modern world. We create space for authentic self-expression, deeper emotional connections, and a more fulfilled existence. Overcoming lust is not simply about repressing desires or rejecting physical attraction. It is about transforming the energy behind those desires into something that serves your greater good. In this section, we will explore practical tools, habits, and mindset shifts that can guide you toward mastering your desires, cultivating self-discipline, and building a life of deeper fulfillment. Drawing from both modern psychological frameworks and traditional wisdom, we will present ways to embrace the journey of growth and self-mastery with patience, self-compassion, and perseverance. Understanding and redirecting energy. One of the core principles in both modern psychology and ancient philosophies is the idea of redirecting energy. The energy that fuels lust is often misunderstood as something inherently negative. However, this energy is fundamentally human. It's a force that can be harnessed and transformed. The first step in overcoming lust is acknowledging that desire itself is not the problem. It's the uncontrolled pursuit of desire that can lead to negative consequences. By learning how to channel this energy into something meaningful, you can transform lust into a force for personal and creative growth. In psychology, this concept is linked to the idea of sublimation, a defense mechanism introduced by Sigmund Freud. Sublimation involves redirecting energy from an unacceptable or disruptive impulse, like lust, into socially acceptable and constructive outlets, such as creative endeavors, intellectual pursuits, or athletic achievements. By engaging in activities that allow you to express this energy in healthy ways, you can regain control over your desires rather than allowing them to control you. A simple but powerful way to begin this transformation is by practicing mindfulness. When you feel the urge to indulge in lustful thoughts or behaviors, take a moment to pause, breathe, and observe what's happening in your mind. Instead of suppressing the feeling, notice its presence without judgment. This awareness allows you to make conscious choices rather than reacting impulsively. Over time, this practice strengthens your ability to redirect your focus and choose actions that align with your higher goals. Developing emotional and mental discipline. Another crucial aspect of overcoming lust is the cultivation of emotional and mental discipline. Lust often arises as a response to emotional dissatisfaction, loneliness, or boredom. The impulse to seek out temporary pleasure can serve as a way to fill an emotional void. To address this, you must learn to cultivate emotional resilience and mental strength. One approach to developing emotional resilience is through self-reflection and journaling. When you feel the urge to act on lustful impulses, take time to reflect on what might be driving these emotions. Are you feeling unfulfilled in your relationships? Are you seeking validation or comfort from external sources? By writing down your thoughts and feelings, you can begin to understand the deeper emotional triggers behind your desires. This self-awareness is the first step in breaking free from the cycle of lust and creating healthier emotional patterns. Moreover, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, provides powerful tools for reworking the mental patterns that fuel lust. In CBT, you identify and challenge distorted thoughts and beliefs that contribute to unhealthy behaviors. For example, if you believe that seeking pleasure is the only way to feel valued or fulfilled, you can begin to question this belief and replace it with more empowering thoughts. Instead of associating your worth with external validation, you can begin to cultivate a sense of inner worth based on personal growth, integrity, and self-respect. Discipline also involves building new habits that encourage personal growth. This may include engaging in practices like meditation, yoga, or physical exercise, which not only improve physical health but also help to calm the mind and balance emotions. By committing to daily routines that promote self-discipline, you can create a foundation of stability and control that strengthens your ability to resist impulsive desires. Cultivating inner peace and spiritual wisdom. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have offered profound wisdom on how to transcend base desires and achieve true fulfillment. Many of these practices involve the cultivation of inner peace and spiritual awareness, which can serve as powerful antidotes to the chaos of unchecked lust. For example, Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control and let go of what we cannot. By developing the Stoic virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, you can gain mastery over your desires and emotions. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This mindset encourages the practice of moderation and self-control, which are essential for overcoming lust and living a balanced, purposeful life. Similarly, Sufi wisdom emphasizes the importance of spiritual purification and self-discipline. In Sufism, lust is seen as a distraction from the divine and the pursuit of spiritual truth. By engaging in practices like fasting, prayer, and meditation, individuals can cultivate greater spiritual awareness and detach from worldly desires. Sufi poets like Rumi have written extensively about the importance of overcoming the illusion of separation, including the illusion created by lust, and returning to a state of pure, unifying love. One modern practice that mirrors these ancient teachings is mindful meditation, which encourages self-awareness and detachment from fleeting desires. By practicing mindfulness, you can create a space between the impulse and the action, allowing you to make conscious decisions that reflect your true values and higher aspirations. Meditation can also help you access a deeper sense of inner peace, reducing the need to seek out external pleasures as a way to alleviate inner turmoil. Building healthy relationships. While lust is often thought of as an individual issue, it is closely intertwined with our relationships. Building healthy, fulfilling relationships is one of the most powerful antidotes to the emptiness that lust can sometimes fill. When we seek connection based on mutual respect, trust, and understanding, we begin to transcend the transactional nature of lust-driven interactions. One way to build healthier relationships is by practicing active listening and emotional intimacy. Instead of focusing on physical attraction or validation, try to deepen the emotional bond with your partner. Engage in conversations that go beyond the surface level, exploring each other's dreams, fears, and vulnerabilities. By building emotional intimacy, you create a foundation of trust and connection that transcends lust and lays the groundwork for long-lasting love and fulfillment. Another key practice is developing shared values and goals within a relationship. When both partners are aligned in their values and committed to growth, the relationship becomes a partnership in the truest sense. Lust, in this context, is not a fleeting desire to be satisfied, but a shared journey of mutual respect, support, and growth. The journey of gradual growth. It's important to remember that overcoming lust is not a one-time achievement, but a gradual journey of self-mastery. Perfection is not the goal. Progress is. You will likely face setbacks, and it's crucial to be compassionate with yourself during moments of struggle. The key is to maintain a mindset of gradual growth and self-trust, acknowledging that every small victory is part of a larger transformation. By consistently practicing mindfulness, self-reflection, discipline, and spiritual wisdom, you will gradually notice a shift in your relationship to lust. Over time, the craving for fleeting pleasure will give way to a deeper sense of contentment and fulfillment. You will begin to see yourself not as a slave to desire, but as a master of your own emotions, actions, and life. As we come to the close of this exploration, we can see that overcoming lust is not merely about resisting or repressing desire, but about transforming our relationship with it. Lust is a deeply human experience, one that has shaped our thoughts, behaviors, and societies throughout history. But what if we looked at it not as something to be ashamed of or rejected, but as a force to be redirected, something that could serve our greater potential instead of hindering it? In this journey, we've examined the roots of lust from ancient philosophies to modern psychological frameworks, explored how lust impacts our identity and relationships, and discovered practical tools for mastering our desires. What has become clear is that overcoming lust is not a simplistic, one-dimensional goal, but rather a multifaceted journey towards greater self-mastery, self-awareness, and deeper fulfillment. The power to overcome lust, and thus, in a broader sense, the world, is not about control, but about choice. The choice to redirect energy towards something that aligns with our higher selves, the choice to recognize the deeper emotional or spiritual needs that lust can mask, and the choice to embody a life rooted in inner peace, emotional resilience, and healthy relationships. A journey of self-mastery. When we talk about overcoming lust, we are, in essence, speaking about self-mastery, a mastery that requires time, patience, and deep personal commitment. It's a journey that invites us to reclaim our power, to stop being driven by the impulses of our unconscious desires, and instead to consciously choose how we engage with our emotions and actions. Self-mastery does not happen overnight, but with each small step we take in practicing mindfulness, developing emotional resilience, and committing to our personal growth, we move closer to a life that is intentional and aligned with our highest values. The journey of overcoming lust, therefore, becomes a journey of becoming who we truly are. It's about aligning our actions with our deepest desires for meaning, connection, and fulfillment. It's about creating space for the energy of desire to be channeled into creative expression, intellectual exploration, emotional depth, and spiritual wisdom. All the things that ultimately lead us to a richer, more fulfilling existence. The role of conscious relationships. One of the most profound takeaways from this exploration is the recognition of how relationships, both with ourselves and others, shape our experience of lust. Lust, when left unchecked, can often be a reaction to unmet emotional needs, insecurities, or a lack of connection. But when we cultivate deep, meaningful relationships grounded in mutual respect, vulnerability, and emotional intimacy, we create a space where true connection can flourish. In these relationships, lust is not merely about physical attraction or gratification. It becomes a deeper, more spiritually enriching bond that transcends the superficial. In a world that often celebrates instant gratification, the path of overcoming lust requires us to move beyond the transactional nature of desire and seek out relationships that nourish us on a deeper level. This journey encourages us to explore not only who we are in the presence of others, but also how we show up for ourselves, with honesty, compassion, and the courage to face our vulnerabilities. Transforming lust into wisdom. Ultimately, overcoming lust is not about eradicating it, but transforming it into wisdom. Every desire, when examined with curiosity and compassion, reveals something about our inner world, our needs, our fears, our longing for connection, and our quest for meaning. By embracing this wisdom, we begin to see that lust, like all of our emotions, is a messenger. It's a signal calling us to deepen our understanding of ourselves and our lives. As we cultivate the practices of self-awareness, mindfulness, discipline, and compassion, we start to see desire not as a force to be feared, but as an invitation to grow, to evolve, and to live more authentically. In this way, overcoming lust becomes a gateway to greater self-understanding, emotional mastery, and spiritual depth. The world is filled with distractions, false promises of fulfillment, and fleeting pleasures that can pull us away from our true path. Lust, in its various forms, is one of these distractions. But through conscious awareness, emotional discipline, and spiritual practice, we can choose a higher path, a path that honors our deepest desires, our humanity, and the quiet strength that comes from living with purpose. A reflective question. So, I leave you with this. What would your life look like if you were able to transform the energy of lust into a force for your greater good? How might your relationships, your creativity, your career, and your sense of inner peace evolve if you could step into your own power, free from the impulsive drives that often cloud your judgment? Overcoming lust is not about denying your desires. It's about becoming the conscious creator of your life, about living with intention and mastering your impulses. This is not a journey of perfection, but of constant self-awareness and growth. And in this journey, you have the power to transcend not only lust, but the world itself, its distractions, its superficialities, and its fleeting promises of happiness. Embrace the journey, trust the process, and remember that overcoming lust is just the beginning. The path to true fulfillment, self-mastery, and meaningful connection is waiting for you to step into it. As we've journeyed together through this exploration of lust, desire, and self-mastery, I want to leave you with a thought. The path to overcoming lust isn't a rigid, one-size-fits-all formula. It's a personal journey, one that invites you to embrace your inner strength, confront your emotional needs, and redirect your energy towards what truly serves you. This journey requires patience, self-compassion, and the courage to reflect honestly on who you are and who you want to become. If you found value in the insights shared today, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. This is a space where we come together not just for superficial content, but for meaningful reflection, personal growth, and deep emotional intelligence. Here, we explore the complexities of the human experience, from timeless philosophical ideas to modern psychological practices, and offer practical tools that you can apply to your daily life. We're not here to offer quick fixes or superficial answers. Instead, we're here to delve into real, transformative topics. Topics that can empower you to reclaim your personal power, cultivate emotional resilience, and live with purpose. If you've ever felt the weight of confusion or aimlessness in your life, this is your space to reclaim direction and discover the deeper layers of your being. As you continue on your path of personal growth, remember, you are not alone. We are all in this together, striving for a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us. By subscribing, you're joining a community committed to growth, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. Each video offers insights and tools that can help you move closer to your truest self, so you can build the life you want, grounded in wisdom, strength, and authenticity. So, take the next step in your journey. Subscribe now, and let's continue exploring how we can become more aware, more grounded, and more aligned with the life we are meant to live. I'm excited to continue this journey with you, and I'm grateful to have you here. What will you choose next for your growth? The journey is just beginning.